working with watercolors, doing a little landscape. To start, I'm going to pick up some alizarin crimson on my brush, and right in the center, right in here, and then the same down below. I'm going to pick up some of my, a little bit of yellows, just right here. Not much. I'm going to go into my blues, start up the top, come down to meet. And I've got two color blues. I've got phthalo blue and an ultramarine blue. Phthalo blue is the darker, colder blue. The ultramarine is a little bit warmer, a little brighter. Now that I have that, I'm just going to wet a brush. This brush is strictly has water on it. And then I'm going to start with the yellows and just dragging it sideways. Pick up more water, work my way up into the alizarins. I'm going to pull that sideways. I'm going to do a little scrubbing along the edges. And I'm going to work my way up into the blues. Same thing down here. So basically my paper is now wet, and I have the colors dragged out to the edges. I'm going to go back in a little more of that alizarin. I'm going to drag a little more of that in, pull it out a little further. Back in just some water. I'm going to go back in, darken my blues. You can get it as dark or as light as you want. The yellows look fine. I'm going to leave those just like they are. And with the blues, I'm going to pick up some of that, drag it out. I'm going to go right into my darker blues. Pick up a little more color. And drag that right across. Now that I have it, the paper all wet and everything dragged out, I'm going to kind of just dry that a little bit and kind of drag those two a little bit together. You're going to get a little bit of a lavender in there. Clean that brush. And right where the yellows are. I didn't add any more yellow, but I did add the alizarin, so I'm going to just kind of drag that out. I think I'll pull it a little bit more towards the edges. We're going to have a mat over top of it, so get a little more of the yellows right here. Okay, we're going to let that dry. And you can use a hair dryer to dry this if you want. It'll dry it a little faster, but we're going to let it just dry a little bit. This is fairly dry. I have the corners taped down, and I did lift these two up and flatten it out a little more by running my fingers just along here and retaping here. Same thing here, because when you do wet it, it does have a tendency to buckle. All right, so the paper is basically dry. You may feel a little slight dampness, but it's basically dry. And we're going to start, and the reason I did this is it gives us some background color. So when we do our landscapes, anything that shows through that we don't paint will still have color. So let's go and get started. So I'm going to start up in the sky area. I'm going to use some of my blues, some of my alizarin crimsons, get sort of a lavender color I'm going to add just a touch of the black to it, not much. I don't want a gray. I just want to darken that and gray it down slightly. So, and I've got my flat brush, and I'm going to start here. I want to keep some of the red of the sky, but you can see that's basically purple. And I'm going to pick up some more color. And basically, and I don't want them all even, so I'm going to come up a little higher with this one. Let me pick up a little more color. I'm going to come up a little bit higher. And you can keep darkening this. With watercolors, they have a tendency to dry lighter than, you say, your acrylics, which dries darker. Oils have a tendency to dry the same color basically you put on. Then I'm just taking some water, basic water on it, and dragging some of that down. Then I'm going to dry my brush with a little bit of paper towel. And then I'm going to kind of come back in on the lighter side, and I'm going to pick some of that color off. You can even go in and add a little darker over here, maybe even just a touch of the blue on the other side. Not much. Clean my brush. Kind of pull that out. The brush is just damp. So I've got some basic hills here. I'm going to go in. This time I'm going to pick up some of my greens with that. Same color I have, I'm just, for the mountains, I'm just adding green to it. And it's sort of a blue-green. And I'm just going to, a little more of the greens. And just sort of pull that along. Clean my brush. I'm separating that, kind of just pulling up from the bottom, and then I'm going to pull some down from the base. And I'm kind of lifting as I pull down, and then lightly just go across. I'm going to pick up more of the greens, still adding more green to that same mix, right along the base, sort of drag a shoreline. Up top, I think I'm going to darken some of these areas. Clean my brush. Pull some of this out on the bottom. And I'm going to even pick up some of the darker colors. Some of my blacks. Mix with that. And kind of, with just a wet brush, pull that out. Looks like maybe some angrier clouds are coming in. I'm just going to do a few here. Same color. This is your, and get some of my darker underneath. Just plain water, drag those out. And then I'm going to drag a few across here. So I guess it's some sky some interest, but you can still see the red along the base of the sky. I'm going to come back into my blues and my greens. And here I'm going to touch and back and forth. I'm going to Just not a lot, just where here and there. I just want to show some detail on a few of them. Gives you the idea it's evergreens over here, maybe. This one's a little taller. And it's almost back and forth, back and forth. A little darker as I come down. And I can come in, put a few. Things along the bottom. And just using a corner. Maybe something growing along the base here. So I've got a little background here. I'm going to come in. I'm going to take some of my blues and draw a darker line, shoreline here. And then I'm going to maybe streak a few lines through here as if the water's coming basically, and it's going to run off the paper over here maybe. All right. So we've basically got our line of water. And you can see how these right here are leaving marks. And I like that. You can, if you don't like it, you can take your brush and kind of, dry brush and kind of just sort of rub some of that out. But I like the effect, so I'm going to leave that. Looks like some clouds moving in. Maybe a storm is starting to build up. So now we're going to do the shoreline. I'm going to pick up blue, maybe some alizarin, our greens, all our dark colors. And it's more green than anything else. I just want a darker color, more towards the blue-green. I added the alizarin just to darken it more. Now, this side is still wet, so I'm going to let that right along the edge dry. But right here, I'm going to kind of let's get a little more green in there. And it's just dark. Bring the land out a little bit here. Then I'm going to add, I think I'll just grab a different brush here. I'm going to get a little bit of the yellows mixed with some of the greens. Kind of tap that in a little bit, which basically adds a few highlights to it. I'm going to take a fan brush, and it's damp, and I'm going to pull down right here, kind of go across a little bit, get a little reflections. This I'm going to take, bring it further down. I'm going to start adding some of my yellows to that mix. As it gets closer, you can see the colors a little better. And take my fan brush, maybe right here. And I'm going to take some of the darker blues, my darker colors, kind of right along the shoreline, draw a darker line. I'm going to take some of the yellows, same dirty brush, it's just got some yellows on it. And while this is still wet, I'm going to tap some of that in. Okay, back into my greens and blues with a touch of alizarin in it. Really loading the brush. This is dry now, so I'm going to start up here. Touch, and then it's just back and forth, back and forth. Bringing that tree down. Back in, get some more color, bring it right down into there. And if it's not dark enough, you can always go back in and touch some more. Unlike with acrylics, you start lighter and then add some of the darks to it. Or you can go dark. If you should go dark, you can always come back in with a clean, damp brush and pick some of the darker colors off. But you want to try to preserve the lights as much as you can in the beginning. So we got ourselves a couple little evergreens over here. Like I says, I can take a clean brush that's just damp, and I can actually come in and pick off. You can see how it sort of picks up some of the color there. I think that looks pretty good. So we got some of that. Draw a little darker line right in here. Same thing here. So I'm going to go back on this side, add a tree, same thing. Just back and forth. And what this does, it sort of blocks the sides off where you can now focus more towards the center of the painting. All right, let me pick up a little more color. And just here and there, I'm going to darken that. You can see how that's a little bit there and right down the bottom. And then this side, I'm going to just kind of drag it out. I'm going to pick up some of the yellows. More of the yellows. And this I'm going to drag. In fact, I'm going to pick up my, before I get too far along, drag some of that color down. And I'm going to yellows, greens. I'm going to kind of use the fan brush. Maybe some grasses are growing out here. And you can see a lot more detail. And you just kind of lift up with it. Pick up some of the yellows. Get a little change in color. It doesn't come off, watch your brush more. Pick up some of the yellows. Alright, back into my greens. I'm going to darken this corner here. And don't forget, we're going to be using a mat on this, so we're not going to see all the right to the edges. Alright, and on this side, I'm going to add a few grasses along the shoreline. And you can even grab a pole. And maybe a few down in here. Pick up some of my blues. Just a few grasses growing there in the water, along the water's edge. A few more of these. You can even pick up, oh, let's see. We'll mix a little red with some of the greens. Get almost a brown color. Maybe some of these are brown. You can even put a few over here. Alright, and then I'm going to go back into my blues. Add some water lines. As it comes over here. I'm going to go back to some of my yellows. Maybe out here. Just trying to change some of the colors. Maybe here. I want to get some darker underneath the tree. go into some of the darker greens, some of the blues. And I put some darker, washing my brush and just dragging that out. So we got some shadows. Okay, in fact, I think I'm gonna even darken the base of that tree a little bit. All right, we got a nice little painting. We've got the different variations in color. Here, I'm gonna go back into that alizarin crimson and that green. Get some brown, maybe. There's a tree growing here. Pick up some more, start at the base, widen that, bring it up, and then there's another arm. And we'll just give it some little twigs and sticks. You put how many you want. Let's widen that one a little bit. Maybe this one, sort of little crooked one. I'm gonna bring that little down a little more. I'm gonna pick up some of the blues and greens. Kind of pull that out a little bit. And maybe I'll use my fan brush. Some yellows, greens, with a touch of the blue in it. And just kind of, I don't want a lot of leaves. We worked on, just want a few. Maybe there's a couple there. I'm gonna go in with more of the yellows. And I'm more or less using the corner of the fan brush. Just tapping here. So we got a few leaves on it. A couple darker ones up here. Stand back, take a look, see what you need. Maybe some of the yellows. In fact, I think I'll go back to my big brush. That was working better. Not much. I don't want a lot of highlights on these. They're far away. Just a few. And like I said, and I'll take get some of the blues, dark colors, maybe here. You can even pull up some grasses with these. Let's get that a little more watery. It doesn't want to come off my brush. And you can see you get some more delicate types of grasses growing there. You can even come in with the smaller one if you think you need a few more leaves here and there. So I think we got a finished painting in watercolor. We'll sign that one. This is a dry spot here. And let's get our mat. Move our stuff away. And we put our mat on there. And we can kind of move it around a little bit. I think we got a nice painting here. And you notice how that's outside. You can always go back in and add to a painting. Maybe there's one right here. And let's get a little more yellow and green into that. Maybe there's one back here. I said, if you take a dry, clean one, you can always pick up some of that. Yeah, I like that better. We got a little more tree over here. All right, I hope you enjoyed that one.